Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to be reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man number 42. We're going to be going through the entirety of the comic, so spoiler warning ahead if you haven't read the issue yourself, and at the end I will be giving my thoughts and opinions on it, so do stay tuned for that. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video at any point, make sure to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's jump right into this comic. Our story begins immediately where the previous one left off, after the fight between Spidey's team and Kingpin's team. The fight basically ends right after the Kingpin ends up receiving a call from some of his henchmen, and now we get to find out what that call entails. And it looks like the Kingpin just hired some men to go grab the Rose and take him out of the game, effectively enabling the Beetle to take over the territory that the Rose was also fighting for. The Kingpin went as far as hand his phone over to Tombstone so that he could communicate with the Beetle to make sure that she was alright. And Spider-Man questions why he didn't just say that instead of going through that entire fight from the previous issue. And the Kingpin explains it that him and his missus basically want to tussle it out just like the old times, insinuating that the crazy woman from the previous issue is his missus. Having this commotion basically all settled, and right before Fisk ends up leaving with his crew, he tells Tombstone at the Spidey team that Masque is still a key player in this overall game. And Spider-Man brings up the fact that he saw Masque get taken out, basically at the wedding of his best friend Randy, which effectively happened in issue 31. The Spidey team now by themselves get into contact with Luke Cage, who's dealing with his own shenanigans in the city. And they bring up the fact now with Luke Cage that Masque is still a key player in this overall game. The story then ends on Spider-Man's perspective by having him and She-Hulk split off from Tombstone, as what I'm assuming is happening is they're going to be regrouping with the previous members that they were fighting with earlier, back in issue 39. Now from the Beetle's perspective, after the Rose was taken away in a similar fashion that I can best describe as a disobedient kid getting pulled by the ear from his mother, the Beetle has gotten very cocky after effortlessly acquiring this new territory. Now the plan is for the Beetle and her crew to prepare for Masque to eventually make a move on them. But it looks like after getting to one of their hangouts, the Beetle and her crew are confronted by Masque herself already. But instead of any physical fighting ensuing, Masque just gives her backstory, which gives more context into her involvement in the overall story, which I personally like. But somehow both the Beetle and Masque come to the conclusion that they have to settle things in Central Park at dawn, effectively having both of them split off to prepare for the fight. Now the story does state in this issue that Masque is able to influence the character Shotgun by using technology and magic that she has mastered. I'm only bringing that up because they do actually previously establish that she's actually using technology and magic back when they first kicked off this entire event in issue 1 of its own making, as well as establish that Masque is also working with Rabble, a villain that Miles Morales fights in his own comic run. Although I'm not quite sure if Masque is using the magic and technology to influence Rabble in some way. And then the story ends right before the conflict itself in Central Park on a to be continued. And that is it for our comic, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on to our thoughts, comments, and concerns. So, what do we think about the comic itself? Well, before I give my thoughts, I do want to mention that Ultimate Spider-Man number 1 did release the previous week, and as good as that book was, I'm gonna leave my bias towards how good that book was aside, so it's not gonna contradict or conflict with my thoughts and opinions on what I thought about this comic. I'm gonna be reviewing it from the perspective of how the story is going so far. And I'm not gonna be constantly comparing, oh, how good Ultimate Spider-Man number 1 was, because of course we know Ultimate Spider-Man number 1 was good. But this is its own separate storyline in the main comic 616 universe. I'm gonna isolate the review to solely how this comic stands on its own, as well as how it stands in the overall story arc that they're going with. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I can honestly say this story was pretty bad. I definitely didn't enjoy it. The best way I could probably describe the overall story arc itself is like a sneeze that you just can't get out. Now, imagine that sneeze actually being a very good comic book. And what I would consider the pretty good issues so far would be issue 39 and the previous issue. As I've been reviewing the story as the issues come out, I think, oh, issue 39, that's definitely a sneeze. It's a pretty good story. Or issue 41, yep, that's definitely a sneeze. But then you get the issue issue that comes right after, and they start explaining more of the background and give more context into what's happening. And then the overall story arc starts feeling like the sneeze that you actually can't get out. You just sort of gaslight yourself into thinking that the sneeze actually came out, but it hasn't come out yet. Hopefully what I'm saying is actually making sense, and hopefully issue 43 is going to be that sneeze. But so far this issue has proven me otherwise, and let's dive right into what I'm going to be talking about. The previous issues really did build up the Kingpin's involvement in this overall story, and the fact that Tombstone believed that the Kingpin was able to stop this overall game a lot sooner so his daughter doesn't get hurt. So we get a really cool fight with the Kingpin, only to have it end with him already having the upper hand. So I'm personally thinking that now that Kingpin's here, things are gonna get serious after the fight from the previous issue and establishing that he has the upper hand. But no, instead of doing anything actually serious, what he does is get the Rose, his son, out of the game so he doesn't get hurt, even though he clearly had the firepower to take out the Beetle in that scenario. And they play off that crazy fight from the previous issue as just the Kingpin wanting to fight like old time's sake. The Kingpin even goes out of his way to take out his phone and hand it to Tombstone to let him know that his daughter is okay and that she's in the other line talking to him directly. And then the Kingpin just leaves, just saying that he's out of the game because he has a family and a son now, I guess. That is dumb explanation number one right there, ladies and gentlemen. What is going on with the Kingpin? And then right after the conflict with the Kingpin's hired men trying to take the Rose out of the game, the Beetle gets incredibly cocky for getting this newly acquired territory, even though everything she has acquired has been just given to her. She gets cocky enough that even her injured crew doesn't drive off the fact that she wants to prepare for Madame Masque to eventually make a move on her. So surprise, surprise, that is exactly what goes down in this very issue, right? So what exactly happens? There's the meeting between the Beetle and Madame Masque, and as far as we know as the Amazing Spider-Man comic readers, Madame Masque doesn't really have anything special about her. Yeah, sure, she has the technology and magic that she deals with, but it hasn't been portrayed in a proper fight yet, or if it functions that way at all. But the meeting with the Beetle and her, when Madame Masque surprised the Beetle at her hangout, it looked like Madame Masque was just simply by herself. The Beetle could have easily just I don't know, just taking her out. Like I said, as far as we know, Madame Masque is just a regular person wearing a mask. This is the very moment when they give the very backstory and more context into the happenings and what's going down with Madame Masque's overall goal. And that part I did enjoy. And that overall meeting with the Beetle and Madame Masque was just a way to force feed that backstory into the story. The Beetle does have her new armor on. She could just swoop and just take her out. She also has all of her men because they're definitely hanging out at her own HQ. Just take Madame Masque out. What are y'all waiting for? Oh right, we needed to tell that backstory for some reason in this context. They both really explain how both of them really just want to conquer New York, and they're gonna stop at nothing to do so. They sort of have like an obvious, nuh-uh, my will is stronger than your will kind of moment. If the Beetle's will was better than Madame Masque's will, why didn't the Beetle just offer there? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going too far on that, and that is reason number 2 on why I do not like this comic. The overall story doesn't really feel like it's about Spider-Man at all. Like, the guy had his opportunity to go out and fight the crime, but somehow he was convinced by Tombstone, also the She-Hulk was easily convinced by Tombstone, that he knew better, and that he himself had the only way to stop this overall fighting from happening in New York. And so Spider-Man and She-Hulk were easily swayed by Tombstone to go waste time in his own shenanigans that he's trying to accomplish, instead of Spider-Man going out and stopping all this madness from taking place in the first place. That is really beyond stupid. It boggles my mind. This story arc it's whack. And there's that brief moment where they do communicate with Luke Cage and talk about what's going down and Madame Masque and all that stuff. But at no point throughout this story, through the Amazing Spider-Man comics, do they establish Luke Cage actually questioning why they're working together with Tombstone. I really like Luke Cage's involvement in the story. He's actually portrayed just doing his own thing and just fighting whatever fight he's doing. I love that. That's amazing. But he never questions why they're working with Tombstone. So far, the story arc that they're working with has established some pretty cool elements that I did enjoy, but the overall main story that they're working with has been so horrible. The story ends with the supposed conflict in Central Park as the cliffhanger, but you're really supposed to expect me to be excited for that? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. Those are my thoughts on the comic book. Let me know what your thoughts on the comic was if you ended up reading it. Did you guys like it? Did you guys hated it? I'm sure you guys hated it if you read it. Like, there's no way you could like this comic. I still do believe the Beetle looks incredibly dumb, and I stand by it. I leave you with that. If you enjoyed this video at any point, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.